You know that feeling when you hear a story so unbelievable that you have to stop and ask, wait, how did I never know this? That's exactly what's about to happen to you right now. Let me tell you about a woman who cracked open the secret to one of the most powerful forces in the universe, and then watched as someone else walked up on stage to collect the prize. No thank you, no public acknowledgement, just silence. Her name was Lise Meitner, and if you've never heard it before, well, you're not alone. Picture this. It's the early 1900s. Women aren't even allowed to study at most universities. Physics is a men's club, with only a few exceptions, Marie Curie being one of the rare names anyone might know. And into that world walks a shy but fiercely determined young woman from Vienna, with a head full of equations and a stubborn belief that she belongs in science. It's the kind of moment you'd expect in a movie, but the real story is far more dramatic. Here's what makes this even more intense. What she discovered, nuclear fission, would go on to change the world forever. It powered cities. It ended wars. It also created one of humanity's most terrifying weapons. And she, the person who explained the physics behind it, refused to have any part in turning it into a bomb. We're going to talk about why she made that choice, but not yet. Trust me, when you hear the full reason, it'll hit you right in the chest. Now, let me give you a little image of Lise at work. She's in a chilly Berlin laboratory, coat still buttoned because there's barely any heating, jotting down calculations so fast the ink smudges. Around her, the clatter of glassware and the low hum of radioactive equipment. She's working side by side with Otto Hahn, a chemist whose name you might have heard. For decades, they're partners solving nuclear puzzles together. They even isolate a new element, protactinium, something most of us will never see but which mattered a lot to nuclear science. And through all those years, they share credit, until they don't. Here's where I want you to pause and think how many times in history have we heard a version of this story. Someone, often a woman, does the heavy lifting, but the spotlight falls on someone else. It happened to Rosalind Franklin with the discovery of DNA structure. It happened to Jocelyn Bell Burnell, who discovered pulsars, and it happened to Lise Meitner, in maybe the most dramatic way possible. By the way, this isn't just another sad she didn't get credit story. This is also about courage, the kind of courage that meant running from Nazi Germany in the middle of the night, the kind that meant turning down an invitation to work on a project everyone assumed would save the Allies. Yes, I'm talking about the Manhattan Project. But before we get there, you need to know exactly how she found herself at the center of one of the biggest scientific breakthroughs of the 20th century. Oh, and don't think this will be a dry history lesson. This is a story with lab rivalries, coded letters, a winter train escape, and one of the most shocking Nobel Prize decisions ever made. Stick with me in a few minutes. You'll see why scientists now call her the mother of the atomic age, even though her name was nearly erased from the headlines. Berlin in the 1930s was the beating heart of nuclear research. Imagine walking into the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute. Back then, the corridors filled with chalkboards covered in equations so complicated they looked like secret codes. The smell of hot glass and chemicals in the air, the quiet intensity of minds that knew they were on the edge of something huge. And right in the middle of it all, Lise Meitner. She was one of the very few women in the building, and she wasn't just the woman in the room, she was the physicist everyone respected for her razor-sharp grasp of atomic theory. But the political storm clouds were gathering, the Nazi regime was tightening its grip, and suddenly being Jewish in Germany wasn't just a personal detail, it was a death sentence. Lise's Austrian passport offered her a little breathing space at first, but when Austria was annexed in 1938, she became a direct target. This is one of those moments where science and history collide in the most brutal way, brilliant minds having to choose between their work and their lives. Here's where it gets intense. Otto Hahn and Fritz Strassmann were running experiments bombarding uranium with neutrons, and they kept getting strange results, lighter elements, where there shouldn't be any. They didn't understand what was happening. So Hahn wrote to Lise, who by that time had been forced to flee Berlin. She escaped in almost cinematic fashion, slipping out with only a small suitcase, boarding a train into the Netherlands under a false identity, and finally making it to Sweden. This wasn't just moving to a new job. This was running for her life. On a winter walk in the Swedish countryside, Lise sat on a tree trunk with her nephew, Otto Frisch, and sketched calculations in the snow. They realized the uranium nucleus wasn't just getting chipped, it was splitting in two. This was nuclear fission. They even came up with the term fission to describe it, borrowing it from biology. The physics was clear. A tiny particle hitting the nucleus could release an unimaginable amount of energy, and the chain reaction, that could be unstoppable. Now, think about that for a second. It's like if you gently tapped a boulder with your finger and it exploded into two pieces, flinging shrapnel across the mountainside with enough force to change the landscape. That's how radical this idea was. And the person who figured it out wasn't in a fancy lab, but in a frozen forest, thinking on her feet. If you made a discovery that could change the world, but also destroy it, what would you do? Lise Meitner made her choice, and it's one of the reasons I admire her the most. She refused to take part in turning nuclear fission into a weapon. When American scientists invited her to join the Manhattan Project, she turned them down flat. She didn't want her work to be used for killing. That's a level of conviction that's rare, especially when you think about how tempting it might have been to join the biggest scientific mission of the time. This isn't just a story about one scientist. It's about how many names we don't know because history didn't write them down or didn't want to. In that era, credit in science was already uneven, but add in the fact that she was a Jewish woman in Nazi Europe, the odds of her being recognized were close to zero, and yet she kept working, kept publishing, kept pushing forward. Meanwhile, back in Germany, Otto Hahn submitted their experimental results to a journal without Lise's name. He described the chemical evidence of the split, but left out the physics explanation that she had worked out. And in 1944, when the Nobel Prize in Chemistry was awarded for the discovery of nuclear fission, it went solely to Hahn. No shared award, no mention of Lise Meitner's role, nothing. What happened next is almost stranger than fiction. Even after being erased from the official credit, Lise never lashed out publicly. She stayed gracious, even towards Hahn. Some say it was dignity, others say it was just exhaustion from years of surviving under impossible conditions. But I think it was because she had her eyes on something bigger, the legacy of her work, not just the medal. If stories like this, the hidden truths, the women behind world-changing moments, inspire you the way they inspire me, you'll love the other videos I'm making here on Herspire. So if you want more of these untold chapters of history, you know what to do. Hit that subscribe button and stay with me. It makes me wonder, how many breakthroughs have we missed because the person behind them never got the resources, the recognition, or even the freedom to keep going? And how different would our world look if we'd heard all their names? Did you know that when Lise was in Sweden, her discovery was happening at the same time Albert Einstein was signing a letter to President Roosevelt warning about Germany's nuclear potential? Two paths, one choosing to push governments forward, one choosing to step back from the weapon entirely. It's a reminder that even in the same moment in history, brilliant minds can take completely different roads. When the war ended, the world entered a new kind of tension, the nuclear age. Cities lit up with atomic energy, but the shadow of the mushroom cloud hung heavy over everyone's head. And somewhere in Sweden, Lise Meitner kept working quietly, teaching, researching, and speaking about the moral responsibilities of scientists. Recognition started to come, though never quite in the way it should have. She received the Max Planck Medal in 1949, a rare honor for any physicist. In 1966, she stood alongside Otto Hahn and Fritz Strassmann to receive the Enrico Fermi Award, a moment many saw as an unofficial acknowledgement of her role in nuclear fission. And decades after her death, element 109 was named Meitnerium in her honor. It's the kind of tribute that ensures her name will always live in the periodic table, even if the Nobel Committee never called it. While Lise was living out her final years in England, the space race between the United States and the Soviet Union was in full swing. Men like Yuri Gagarin and John Glenn were celebrated as heroes for pushing humanity upward. But for women like Lise, the victory was quieter, staying in the story at all, when history was so ready to write them out. One of the most moving details of her life is on her gravestone. It reads, "A physicist who never lost her humanity." Simple words, but when you remember she walked away from the chance to make the atomic bomb, they become profound. She understood that being right about science wasn't enough. You also had to be right about what you did with it. It's easy to think history is fixed, that the names we know are the ones who mattered most. But when you start hearing stories like Lise Meitner's, you realize history is also a choice: who gets written in, who gets left out, and who we decide to remember. That choice is ours now. What would you have done in her place? Would you have joined the Manhattan Project, telling yourself the ends justify the means? Or would you have stepped away, knowing you might never see your name in the spotlight? There's no easy answer, but Lise made hers. She passed away in 1968 at the age of 89 in Cambridge, England. She never married, never had children, but left behind a scientific legacy that ripples through physics to this day. And here's the part that still makes me smile: she inspired generations of women in science. Not because she was famous, but because she was determined. And now, here are those 5 sentences I want you to carry with you. She proved that brilliance doesn't always get its reward right away. She showed that walking away from power can be more powerful than taking it. She taught us that science without ethics is just half the equation. She lived her truth even when the world tried to erase it. And she reminded us that humanity is the most important discovery of all. If you enjoyed this story and want more hidden chapters about the women who shaped our world, make sure to subscribe to my channel, Herspire. I'll be here with more stories to inspire, motivate, and remind you that history has many more heroes than you've been told.